So I'm going to unpin myself and I'm going to give you the whole show. So I want you to start off. So the topic is luxury expired listings. I want to give, like, if it's already incorporated in your presentation, then just roll with it. But I definitely want people to kind of hear the story, like why expireds, how you got into it, a little bit of that background. Like your journey in real estate is like unbelievably awesome, kind of your pedigree and your background. So I want to make sure people are listening. So give a little bit of a background if you're not going to include it in your presentation. But the floor is yours. We're recording, so it is all you. Thanks, Jeannie.
Cool. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
And you can see me?
Yeah, and I think we probably, let me try to remove the spotlight, and I think it'll still, yep. So the way you have it set up, I think, can everyone see Janie on her presentation? Scott Stone? Yep, awesome. All right,
Cool.
you're good.
Cool. So thank you. I am so honored and thrilled and excited to be here with you guys. I am a huge fan of Lars and Stacy and all the Rebs crew, and I am one of you. I've been a longtime Rebs participant and student and all the things. In 2 minutes, I'll tell you my pedigree because I think that is a little bit relevant here. Um, Oh, I've been in business just about 20 years in real estate before that, and still am a licensed general contractor. And I got my license only to sell my own flips. But within a few years, started to do more residential real estate, opened my own brokerage, had my own brokerage open through the whole recession, which was super fun and a super good learning experience all at once. And then Sotheby's came to town and opened, and I joined Sotheby's when they were very small in Miami at that time. There were about 40 agents. Within a year, I became a staff person, a managerial person, and eventually worked my way up to executive vice president of what is now one of the largest Sotheby's franchises in the world. Moved up to Northeast Florida. I'm in St. Augustine now. Was with Sotheby's up here as well. And that's kind of where my luxury expireds story starts. But after my time at Sotheby's, I was a founding agent at Compass, and now I've been at EXP for just short of 3 years. And I'm the co-chair of the luxury division at EXP. And I say all that just so that you know I've been a practitioner, I've been a manager, I've been a coach, I've been all the things, but almost always in luxury. And I've used everything I'm going to talk about here to start over brand new, fresh in a new market. And that's kind of the story I want to tell here, because I think that a lot of people psych themselves out, and you don't need to, with a little bit of insight and tools and maybe a small mindset shift. But what I'm going to do for the next 45 minutes or maybe next 40 minutes, I can try to tighten this up so that we can have some Q&A at the end if there's time, is I just want to tell you the story about why I love expireds and why I love specifically luxury expireds. And I also understand that some of you might not be totally into luxury, which I get, but you might already be selling luxury or like starter luxury and you don't even realize it. And I'm sure all of you would love to know how to help raise your average sales price. So everything we're going to talk about, you can kind of deploy it in whatever makes sense for you, the type of business you like to do, the type of business you like to run. But I want to tell you this fun story because it is fun. I went from zero to a cold, from a complete cold start to a new market. Like I said, I moved to a new market, moved up here to be close to my mom. My mom actually ended up passing away before I physically moved, which was a very unfortunate thing, but I had put all the things in motion. I was like, why not? I'll just start over. I'm excited about it. And I did. And I moved up here to St. Augustine or Northeast Florida. But I didn't know anybody. And I was thinking, how am I going to start my business over from scratch? Because before I was in management at Sotheby's, I was a selling agent. Even though I owned a brokerage, I was still selling. So I had to kind of figure out how am I going to start from scratch. And I didn't know. I was new to the market. I didn't have any sphere of influence whatsoever. Like my mom had literally passed away, and the only other people I knew were in my real estate office. So they were not great prospects for me. But the one thing I did have was I had like a really big dream. And I don't know if there's any KW folks in here, but you know, KW managers, or what do they call them? Market center leaders. They love to reach out to agents when they see them doing well. So I was starting to have a little bit of business, and the KW market center leader reached out to me, and I said, sure, I'll meet with you, but I'm not changing brokerages, just so you know. And he's like, what are your goals? And I was like, well, I want to hit the top 10 in the MLS in my first 3 years here by the end of my third year. And he kind of chuckled, because he's like, well, okay, but this is kind of a very old boys type of environment here, and the people who are doing well are the people who've been here forever. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to figure it out. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to figure out, but I knew that I needed to have some kind of game plan. Now, this was around 2015. We were coming out of the recession. We weren't fully out of the recession, but we're coming out of the recession fairly well. And I knew to be in the top 10, where we have very high priced properties too, along our coast here, Ponte Vedra Beach. High price at that time was 4 or 5 million. Now we have 10 or $20 million properties, but this was 8 years ago. But I realized quickly that as a solo agent, or eventually a solo agent with an admin, that high volume wasn't going to get it, meaning high volume of units, that I was going to have to go after big hits, like big sales prices, so that I could to hit those numbers. And again, I had no idea how I was going to do this. I just knew that's what I wanted to do. But I also was like really interested. I was wanting to manage my time. So I knew that listings had to be the way to go. And I knew I wanted to manage kind of my marketing. So I knew that listings, again, because you can really leverage listings to get more business in a much stronger way than you can managing buyers. And I knew they had to have a really strong urge to sell. So after thinking about it for a little while and putting my head to it, I figured expireds was the way to go. Luxury expired specifically. But I'm not a cold caller. That's just not in my DNA. I'm not a door knocker. It's not in my DNA. So I realized what I wanted to do was kind of warm the folks up a little bit, and get them to feel kind of, I wanted them to call me at the end of the day. I wanted to entice them somehow to call me. I wanted to put enough cheese out there in my bait that they would call me, because I also realized I was brand new to the market. So I didn't have any name recognition. I didn't have any past sales, but I realized, like, there's that rubber band effect, right? Like if you chase somebody with, if each of you holds the end of a rubber band, if you chase somebody, the tension slacks off and there's not that dynamic. But if you pull a rubber band back and you pull back a little bit, people come to you. So I realized I want to put enough things out there and kind of hold back that they would come to me and feel like I was the solution to their problems. And I realized that would put me in a much better kind of negotiation place when I was at the table. So what I did was I studied all the information that I had on expireds. I've watched a lot of people in the past do well with expireds. I had been a student of Barino's back in the day, if any of you guys remember him. I had done a lot of expireds. I had even, no joke, I had created this whole postcard system that seems really stupid now, but back in Miami, I created this whole postcard sequence of like skeletons and made a play off expired and graveyards, and I never got any calls, and now I realize why I didn't. But I had done a lot of stuff in the past, but now that I was in a new market, I really sat down, took the time, and kind of crafted and engineered my very own, what I call now my no-call expired system, which has been evolving ever since, because things that worked then have changed, things have changed. So I sat down, I crafted this whole system, I put it together in a system, and I started in September of 2015, and I was at it every single day, every single day. It took me a while to build the system. I think I started trying to build the system by June or July of 2015, so it took almost 4 or 5 months to put my whole system together, but I started deploying it September of 2015, and I went all the way through end of 2015, maybe a few calls, January 2016, February 2016. And what happened was just like Jiffy Pop popcorn, you know, you put it on the oven and you heat it up and you shake it and you heat it up and you shake it. That's what basically started to happen with me. It took about 4 months of doing my work every single day, putting the things out there every single day, Monday through Friday, not Saturday and Sunday, Monday through Friday, no calling, mailing, if I could find their email, and I'll talk to you about that in just one second. But it was like bang, 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 like Jiffy Pop popcorn. And all of a sudden people were calling because I had been basically pre-warming them up through the whole fall. And I don't know if it's this way in your market, but our market kind of peaks out July or August, and then things slow down. They really level out December, January, and then February is when people start thinking about putting their homes back on the market. So what I was doing was basically priming the pump through that whole fall and early winter time. So once they started calling, it just became this whole effect. So what my system kind of looks like is a big package, big being relative, you know, 20 something pages probably, on the first day sent to them. And then I alternate letter, postcard every single day for the first 2 weeks. Then I slow it down a little every 3 days. Then I slow it down even more every 7 days. Then I slow it down even more every 21 days. And at the end of all my touch points, if they haven't relisted or if they haven't called me or contacted me somehow, then I just put them in my just listed, just sold. If I can find their email, I'll add in an email kind of sequence on top of that. And that's nothing more than simply what's on the postcards. But that's it. I didn't call, maybe I called fewer than 5 people. Like just calling wasn't in, like, not comfortable with it, and I just didn't want to do it. And I bumbled my way through the 5 calls, and I was like, forget this. I tried other things too. I tried having somebody hand deliver the package. I tried hand delivering it myself. I had Uber hand deliver it. I had my local florist take them flowers. I had my local florist take them like a money plant. That really didn't make any difference, because what I did do was track everything. And I really understood what was pushing on the lever, like Lars talks a lot about, what pushed on the lever more and really started to create more traction, and what really didn't have much of an effect. So the system that I've laid out that's on the screen, that is really what had the biggest effect. And the materials were, like I said, I sent a variety of things, a big package that came kind of customized to them with their home on it, customized to them with a handwritten note card in it, sent in a nice colored full-size envelope, then a sequence of postcards, and we can talk about that in a minute too, and then a sequence of letters. So the reason I did it like this was different people respond to different things, right? So some people love to get letters and open the letters up and read the letters. They like to read things. Some people just look at the postcard, they want the visual, they look at that. If I happen to find their email using a couple email tracing systems, a few responded by email as well. Normally, if the people were out of the country, I was much more likely, of course, for them to respond via email because they weren't necessarily getting what was being mailed to them wherever I could find their address. A lot of the people, I am in a second home market, so a lot of the luxury properties are not local folks. They live somewhere else. So that was kind of beneficial as well. But what I found was in sending different types of media, even if when I met with them, they told me they had thrown every single envelope in the trash can, they remembered it because it all looked similar, felt similar. And it was the repetitiveness, it was the consistency of showing up and not going away that kind of won out over the day. You've got to stand out. When people expire, they're being chased by so many people. You guys know this. You might be one of the expired people who call the first day, but they're getting things mailed, they're getting things dropped off at their door, they're having their people knock on their door. And so you really have to stand out with like quality materials. And that first day is super important because here in my market, people the way our MLS is set up, if somebody forgets to renew their property, renew their listing, and it expires, they can relist it the next day and it goes back on the market. And so sometimes agents here are a little sloppy and they let them renew. So I want to get that first package off the very first day so that the sellers at least receive my package. They might extend the listing with their current listing agent and they might give them another month or 3 months or 6 months. But I've had plenty of people call me later because they held on to that first package. They only got the first package because I am very meticulous about stopping mailing if somebody relists or extends their listing. I stop the system for them. So getting that package off into the mail, but being really nice materials, nice graphics, nice everything, the way it touches, looks, feels, super, super important. I actually had somebody call me and they had already determined that they were going to list with a fellow agent of mine. They knew that before it expired, like a fellow agent from my brokerage. But she actually called and she said, I just want to call and tell you, I've never received anything as nice and impressive as the package you sent. That's the kind of impression you want to leave with folks, especially at the higher end, because if they've expired, it may not have been price. We know a lot of times it is price, but what do people normally want to do when their property expires? They find fault with the past agent a lot of the time. And they often think the last agent didn't do a great job marketing, they weren't polished enough, whatever. So if you can wow them and get their attention, that brings you so much further. Remember with the rubber band, I want to bring the people further, closer to me, more interest in what I have to share with them. So like I said, started off the first 4 months, very quiet, very slow. Once it started to hit like this, I ended up listing like this, like this, like this, and it was just like popcorn. And what happened was within 20 months, I had listed over $50 million. 20 months of being in a brand new market. So 20 months from when I arrived in my new market, built the system, deployed the system. 20 months in, I had listed over $50 million of listings with the average price around 1.5, 1.7 million, where at the time my market average in our MLS was around 200,000. So you can see I really pushed it up quite a bit. And this is for a person who had never sold anything in this area. In fact, I didn't even know how to say a lot of the areas names because they pronounce them differently than I would have thought. And I hit that goal, the goal I had told the market center leader from KW when I said I wanted to reach the top 10 by my third year in. I actually made it to number 9 at the end of my second year. So moved up there in 2015. And for the 2017 year, I made it in the top 9 solo agents. I even outsold my owner brokers at the time. But the bigger effect, besides those listings, was the snowball effect of how that massively, massively, massively changed my entire business. Because what happened was the expired listings, they led to more listings because the neighbors would see, oh, she sold that property that had been on the market 2 or 3 times before. Well, she sold it. I better call them. And then a lot of these folks had either multiple properties themselves or had friends and family to refer me to. So it just became a snowball, not to mention all these amazing properties that you can host open houses at, you can get in front of a whole host of other people, gives you a great opportunity to meet neighbors around each of these houses. And so the whole business just really took off like a rocket because of that luxury expired listing system. And also, because I was new, the other added benefit was I got to really meet the most amazing people and have doors open that would have not ever been opened for me, both personally and professionally, if I hadn't really gone after these higher priced properties. This home right here, this is a very well-known historic home in downtown St. Augustine. And on the day I gave this similar presentation to this that I'm giving right now, a couple of years ago, the seller had called me and she was expired. She did not want to list her house. She just wanted me to sell it. In the end, I met with her. I overcame her kind of concerns about listing. And it was, she had a lot of artwork in the house and she didn't want that to be visible in photos. But we overcame that. I ended up selling it. I'm in Florida where we can have both sides of the transaction. So I ended up, excuse me, selling it to both sides. So I had happy seller and happy buyers. And because of the marketing I was doing, I ended up doing at least 25% of the sales ended up having the buyers too. So now I've like double my footprint. And what happened on top of that is having these special different listings rather than, you know, similar listings to everybody else, because luxury listings are kind of unique and different. Most luxury properties are either built by the sellers, massively renovated by the sellers, but often very, very different from each other. It leads to a lot of cool things. It leads to you meeting a lot of people you wouldn't have been able to meet otherwise and grow that sphere of influence. A lot of people think you have to have a luxury sphere to sell luxury, and that's not it at all. You grow your luxury sphere through luxury real estate, luxury expireds, but it also allows you to get in the media a lot more than you're ever able to, specifically and often for individual homes. You can get them in the media because they're so interesting. This home right here I was able to have featured in the Wall Street Journal as the house of the day internationally. When you start to build up things like that, now you're building kind of your portfolio of your marketing so that when you go on a listing appointment, you can show them these are different ways you've been able to have your listings featured. And on top of that, you meet really, really cool people. So the folks that bought the house I just showed you have become two of my very best friends in the world. And this is their wedding, which they held as a small group, as you see here. But this is Highclere Castle, where Downton Abbey is filmed. And they rented out the entire castle for their wedding. So we had a whole 3 or 4 day event in these grounds and around this wedding. And that's just one of the things that have come out with all these amazing listings and meeting people and being successful at selling them, because now they want to refer you to other people because they have something kind of special in their pocket with you. These are folks who are used to dealing with high-end professionals, whether it's their CPAs or their attorneys, and now they have their real estate advisor and they love to refer you. So it becomes a really snowball effect, like I talked about a little bit ago. So why luxury expires and why has it been so great? So what I found is if they relisted, because again, I took really good notes of everything. If they relisted, about 60% of the time, they relisted with the same agent. They might have taken it off the market for a short time to recover or something. But 40% of the time they relisted with somebody else. And I was happy to have the opportunity to be one of the people considered with that 40% that was relisting with somebody else. I also realized that this is my market. You would have to do your own stats, of course. But if they relisted with the same agent, on average, they relisted in about 3 weeks. Maybe they just needed a breather. Maybe they just needed to take a break. But it was on average 3 weeks, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a day. But if they relisted with a new agent, it was often 43 days because now they were really slowing down to take the time to interview other agents, take a breather, and figure out what they're going to do next. And that gave me time to deploy this system that I created. So of the people who contacted me, and about 13% of everybody that I sent things out to, 13% contacted me. The results were about a third, a third, a third. 1/3 of them said, you know, thank you so much. I'm going with another realtor. I've already selected who they are. 1/3 said they were kind of waiting right now. Maybe they weren't going to relist. And then 1/3 said, you know, please come over it and let's talk to me. Only 2 in the whole time ever said, please don't mail me anything anymore. And nobody called me to say that. A few people actually mailed me something to say that. And they were often very nice and said, you know, don't spend your money or time. I'm just not selling it all anymore. So you don't need to mail me anymore. But it was, I didn't have to have that sometimes call reluctance that I had when I was thinking about calling expires, because I wasn't calling. And so I wasn't really interrupting anybody. And it went really well. My kind of listed rate was over 5%, which actually is really great if you consider that compared to direct mail, because now we're having a much higher direct contact, targeted contact, because now we're not doing direct mail to a whole neighborhood where only a small fraction are going to consider listing. We're mailing only people who've shown already they have the interest to list, and that was through the expireds. But it also laid the groundwork for future listings because, like I said, if they didn't call me and they didn't relist, they just went into the just mailed, just listed, just sold direct mail list anyway, so they were still getting stuff. So it's kind of priming the pump for future listings as well. So people always ask me, like, what do you say in the letters? And I basically broke it down into 4 kind of segments. One was their pain, like people who have expired off the market have pain. They're tired of keeping their home up if they still live in the home. It's frustrating. They might have lost something that they wanted to buy. They have paid now for 2 properties, maybe for an extended period of time they didn't expect, but they have pain. They also have frustrations. A lot of times their frustrations are they think that their agent didn't do enough. That's what they think all the time. Their agent didn't do enough. The agent probably did a great job, but the agent didn't do enough telling them what they were doing. So that's one thing. Or their agent just stuck a sign in the yard and put it on the MLS and that was it. Or all kinds of things. I've heard all kinds of things over the year, but they have serious frustrations. And then, of course, they want to know, what do you do differently? So I talk about a lot with them about a bespoke marketing plan. We make a marketing plan just for your house. We really go in and look and try to figure out who are the top 2 or 3 most likely buyer profiles and how are we going to get in front of them. And a lot of times they're just flat out angry. They're angry at real estate agents. So sometimes it's just sitting there and listening to them. But these are the pieces that I contained in my letters and my postcard. Each one was kind of touching on these different things, whether it was the frustration or the pain or what we do differently. So we were getting in front of them with all that information. I do want to say this is not an overnight thing. I know people who like to call expireds like that because sometimes you have an immediate response of somebody to come have an appointment. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. But the good thing about it is the more pieces somebody's received from me, the more likely they are to list if they contact me. If they contact me after 1 or 2 pieces, they're normally saying, I'm relisting, thank you so much, but I've already chosen my other agent, because they already picked their agent out before they expired. If they contacted me, the average across the board who contacted me contacted after 14 and a half touch points. And I point that out because a lot of people say, I've done expireds, I've mailed expires, but it doesn't work. And I ask them how many times. Most people mail 1 thing to expires, or maybe 5 things. I've yet to speak to somebody who's mailed 10 things to expires consistently. The longest of all the pieces was 32 pieces. Somebody got 32 pieces. That included some emails. And then they're like, just come over and list my house. Like, I never spoke to them before. And one gentleman actually said, he left a voicemail. He said, you've hounded me so much. And I thought he was about to tell me off. Just come over and list my house. I looked him up in my system. Turned out it was a $7.5 million property. It was the highest property at the time in that county. So that's why that long kind of touch point kind of works so great. Excuse me. And it also works great for the people who are not local because they have time to take things. People always ask me, like, what's the best letter? And they just want me to share a letter. I get that asked all the time. What's the best letter? Tell me one thing. There's no magic bullet. There's no magic letter, but there is a golden arsenal. And the arsenal is like the whole plan because it's touching, 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 touching. And what you're doing with that plan is, Lars tells us and Stacy tells us about the magic of having a pre-listing package before you go on a listing appointment. This is kind of like little mini pre-listing packages with each thing they get. Each one of these things is handling an objection because we're talking about a communication plan. We're talking about a marketing plan. We're talking about our results. So the more of these things that can get in front of the sellers before they contact us, the better. And what happens is once you set your system up, if you're familiar with a flywheel, what a flywheel is a piece of equipment that it takes a while to get started. Takes a while to get started, but once it gets started, the kinetic engine, the kinetic energy just keeps the wheel going and going and going. Basically, it stores up the mechanical energy to be used for later use. So this no-call luxury expired system does the same thing. It takes a little while to get going, but once it goes, be as little as 30 minutes a day that you spend on it. You do spend more on the first of the month because a lot of people let their listings expire the last day of the previous month. But then it just creates this flywheel effect of, I think what Lars called was automated listings or something like that. And this is kind of, I use Top Producer. It's old school. I don't use Top Producer for anything other than this system because there's a few things that work awesome in Top Producer that I have not been able to find work in other systems. So I call it kind of the backbone of the system because it is that action plan, because it is a kind of a specialized plan. The way Top Producer works and the way this does is you click on something once it's done the next day, because if you think about it, we're adding new properties every single day that have a multi-piece system. And sometimes when I'm really targeted, I have a whole equestrian sequence, I have a whole historic home sequence, a waterfront sequence. I would not be able to keep that straight without an action plan that is just like click and play, click and play. It does require being in person, meaning this is not something you can sub out to a VA in another country because it's all reliant on them receiving, go back here, them receiving handwritten envelopes with real stamps. And ideally, they're getting it the next day. So you do need somebody local. That can be you. I enjoy doing it myself because then when somebody calls me, I've normally looked at their property so much, I'm very familiar with it when they call. And they normally think that you're like only mailing them. So they call you and they're like, oh, you've been, they do expect you to have a high level knowledge of their property when they call. So I found I enjoy doing it myself, but you can have an admin do it if you have a great admin. My tech stack looks like this. Like I said, I use Top Producer to keep it all organized. You have to have at least one expired system that's giving you the expired data every single day for a couple reasons. You can export it every day right into Top Producer. And then also it's telling you which have relisted. So you can stop your system. If you were relying on the MLS to do that, it'd be inconceivably challenging to do. So having at least one, I actually do Red X and Vulcan 7 because I'm kind of neurotic. The post office, of course, for your stamps and things like that. And then some kind of printer for your postcards. But that's it. You can add in slide dial, you can add in Spokio, you can add in these other things if you want to add in calling or slide dialing or emailing. But Top Producer with one expired system, stamps from the post office, and a great admin that's either you or somebody local who loves administrative stuff. They have to love administrative stuff because if somebody messes up this system midway, you would never know. And then they would just, your prospects would stop getting pieces and you'd never know. Sometimes people ask me about calling. Again, calling didn't work for me. If you love calling, I would add that in. I would add it in further in the sequence so they're already warmed up by the time you call. A lot of times sellers that I was working with actually had told me that they really appreciated that I hadn't called them and I hadn't knocked on their door, because at the higher levels, the people for sure are used to having their personal space kind of protected. Sometimes it's even gated or a gated neighborhood anyway, but they're used to having their personal space protected, and calling or door knocking kind of made them feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. So they actually told me they appreciated that I didn't. And like I said, they're normally looking for somebody that they perceive to be operating at a very high kind of professional level. And not to say calling doesn't, it's just going by the responses I got from my expired sellers. They did appreciate that I contacted them by mail and let them contact me when they were ready. A couple lessons learned. You can use RPR has a really good heat map for an area, I would look at the properties you were going to mail to and look at the heat map, because if it's in a super, super cold area on the heat map, I don't know if I'd spend my time. Also, I would deploy or start to add in a little bit more bread and butter. This doesn't work as well on bread and butter properties because these properties normally relist a lot faster than higher priced properties, so you don't have the time to get too many touch points to them. But if they're more special properties, I might add that in there. Another thing in the beginning that I didn't do, excuse me, was I didn't look at the property pictures on the listings. And there was some real dogs. Like as soon as I got to the house, I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't even want this listing. So midway through, I started to look at the pictures on the MLS to make sure that it was a listing I would want to list. And then what really boosted me much faster once I got going was creating a niche. And that's when I really honed in on historic properties. So if you can create a niche on top of this, whether it's historic or golf or whatever, it doesn't mean that's all you do, but it definitely helped. And like I said, if you have an admin, your admin has to love admin. So with that, I have a few minutes. I can answer some questions. Otherwise, I can tell you how to stay in touch if you want to stay in touch. And I just appreciate you, Lars and Stacy, for having me on. And yeah.
Yeah, let me go through a few questions here. So the overarching, and we've been through this today already, is that this is not, you're not going to cash a commission check 3 weeks after starting any system that's worth having in your business for many years, right? How many years have you had this system in your business?
8.
And how much of a pain in the ass was it to set up and to keep it going on a daily? Like it's a lot of work that most agents won't do, right?
Right. And which I love it because that means that, you know, I've already eliminated 99% of the competition right there. So it took me, because I had to create this system from scratch. It took about 4 months to put this system together from scratch. It takes anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour a day actually doing the work. That's putting into the system, let's call it 50 listings a month. Now, some of those listings end up relisting, so then I take them out of my system, but I start with day one with about 50. And at least a third happens normally on the first of the month, because a bunch of people expire on the last day of the month. But yes, it takes time to put together, and it takes time to be in front of people enough before they call. But then, like I said, it creates the most incredible flywheel effect that there was a time I had to stop it. I could not keep up with the business it was bringing in.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
for
awesome.
real.
And I remember one time you were kind of running through this system, and everyone's like, "What does letter 3 say? What does letter 4 say? What is?" And I think you have a link to your system, which I'll let you share. Um, but you made the comment like, it doesn't matter, just get to 32. Like just map out the
Right.
32 with some thoughtful, good looking, higher end, sort of pieces where like over time they're going to have an impression of you. And we had a comment, if you were to make a call 2 to 3 weeks in, you're following up, say, hey, is Mrs. Coffee there? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you got the package I sent out a couple of weeks ago. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to follow up if you guys were considering relisting. I just want to be in the list of choices. I'll continue to mail you helpful information if that's okay. Like that call is way easier to make than like 7:29 a.m., every 20 agents are calling, right? So talk about just calling, I mean, in that regard, kind of fit in to the system.
Yeah, so you can definitely call later in, and that would be exactly it. Hey, this is Jane and Coffee. I just wanted to make sure you received my package or my letters. They're the ones that are, with the black envelope. Oh, yes, I definitely got them. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes they literally tell me I've thrown it in the trash every single time, and they chuckle about it, but then they still call, right? So it's not about what's in there. I talk to you about what to put in there as far as, touch on their pain points, touch on their frustrations, touch on what you do differently. But nothing in the letter or a package, not one of those things is going to convince somebody to list with you. And end of story. And I do this at a very high level. What gets them to call is the consistency where each piece, if they read 1 out of 3 pieces, you're touching on a pain point like, oh yeah, I did feel that way. Oh yeah, because I'm not just saying how I'm better and better and better, because that's also what a lot of agents do. I'm touching on how they're feeling and I'm showing that I understand that and I might have a solution for them. So when I
Yeah.
do call, like I said, I didn't, but somebody who wants to call, it's a much easier conversation.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the easiest way to get in touch with you, you'll just drop the link. The discount code is like they need to type in REBS just to message you on Instagram.
Yeah, just so message me. If you go to Instagram, you can sign up. I only have one link on Instagram, and that's my mailing list. It's my wait list for when this program comes out. Um, and just remember REBS for Rebs so that when the program does go live, and it should be live relatively soon, anybody with the Rebs thing, I will have a 50% discount code for you. And then this little thing, this BTS no call expires, also on Instagram, I have a broadcast channel that's behind the scenes, no call expireds. So I'm revamping my whole expired system right now for 2024. So I'm sharing that on Instagram in my broadcast channel, the behind the scenes, no call luxury expireds. You can follow along, sign up through that link on Instagram for the wait list. And then, like I said, when it goes live, just remember to drop Rebs in there and you'll get a 50% discount.
Awesome. And generally, there's not a whole lot of customization, right? I mean, choose personalized, like handwritten over labels, of course, and that sort of thing, right? Any kind of tips around mailing like that? Like,
Yeah. If you're going after the higher end, 100%, you have to use some kind of colored envelope. Never, ever, ever those white envelopes that you just mail a bill or a check in. Always some kind of colored envelope that is recognizable and stands out from everything else, even if they never open it and they just drop it in the thing. Handwritten, and with a stamp that's a real stamp, like a flower or a tree or whatever the stamps are for this month or this week, not the forever stamp. The reason is we are trying to mail things that when people receive them in the mail, if they stop and pause, right? And it's not looking like just another junk mail, just another letter, or they're just going to throw it right in the trash. They might still throw it in the trash, but they'll recognize and they'll tie it together. So that's super, super important. And also printed on nice paper, not just hand signed. I mean, it takes a little effort, but the effort is worth it if you're listing a 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever it is in your area, 750,000, whatever in your area. The people who are going to connect with that type of material are the people at the higher end because they are used to that in their life. They're looking for that in their marketing. So I would say the one thing is for sure, be very mindful and thoughtful of the materials that you actually mail with.
yeah, that's awesome. And one of the questions here, so um, she wasn't a brand new agent when she started, but the philosophy here is that you can't do all the systems, right? So if you're going to start a system, you're going to go all in for the next decade. That's the mindset I want you to have around it, where you're not going to just dip your toe in this and like 3 months in, it's like, nah, I didn't list any homes, right? You're committing to this thing for many years to come. And you probably can only be really awesome at like 1 or 2 lead gen levers. Like you can like master open houses and that is the thing you own. And you're going to spend the next 2 years doing 150 open houses, right? You will be the best agent in your market at open houses and you'll probably close 50 deals from it or 60 or 70 deals, but not if you're doing one open house a quarter. And then I tried, I sent out 3 things to expireds and like I don't have my database set up yet and I'm sporadic on social media. And then I tried some realtor.com leads and that's what every agent does. So if you're going to do a system like this, I committed to expireds and I never stopped. And agents like the market, they would say, well, there's no expireds now. It's like, well, I'm not going to stop the system. Even if we go from 1 year, we did 750,000 GCI. And yeah, it dropped to 400,000 GCI, but we were working old expireds from 3, 4, or 5 years ago. So I think every agent needs an expired direct response system in their business, whether it's luxury or, it's all the expireds, I am 100%. Like Janie, I called expired for like 10 minutes and the one guy was super mean to me. And I was like, I cannot make a career out of this, right or wrong or indifferent. Some people can, and I couldn't do it. So I went towards direct response. All right, Janie, what's the last word?
I just want to answer what this person said about, yeah, she was new. She wasn't new to the business. I wasn't new to the business, and that mattered at the listing presentation, but I was brand new to the market and I needed to get in the door in the first place. So to the market, I was new. And if you're new to the business, you can still do that work and find one or two or three agents in your brokerage who are comfortable at that level and say, hey, if I deploy this system, would you go on listing appointments with me and we can share the listing? And I bet you for sure they would do that for a year, and then you won't be new to the business either. And then you can go on your way and continue the system that you've been building up.
Oh, that's a really good idea. That's a nugget right there. That's awesome. 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 Thanks, Janie. I appreciate you as always. Definitely message
Thank
at
you.
Janie C on Instagram
At JDC.
and at Janie C. Yep. All right, cool.